Guys, so today I'm going to be soldering the surface mount components from the boards I got from PCB, and I also got a stainless steel solder stencil. And if you've never used a stencil before, you can kind of build yourself a little frame with some other boards and tape it down. And once you have the footprints all lined up, you just tape the stencil down, and you want to make sure that all the boards are clean, the stencil's clean, and then you want to just apply some solder paste to the stencil and then squeegee until all the pads are completely filled. Now this is a stencil without a frame, and if you want to invest some money in a larger stencil fixture, which is more for production stuff, but basically the stencil will come with a frame. The frame goes into the fixture, and then you can do board after board, fairly quickly. But for me and for most people, this is fine. And you don't even have to buy the stencil, but stencils are getting so cheap now that it doesn't make sense not to. This is $10, and it's much easier to get an even distribution of solder. So after I have all the solder paste on the board, I'm going to be using these little compartments, and you want to make sure to put the parts on from smallest to largest. Just makes it easier. You put a large chip on, and then it's hard to sometimes get around the chip, so it's kind of just a good thing to do. And also, if you're going to use little compartments like this, you want to leave just the one you're working on open. So like I'll do all the LEDs first, and I'll close this one, and I'll move on. This is just so you don't accidentally drop one part into the other bins by mistake, and sometimes it's hard to distinguish the parts. They have small markings, and some parts don't have markings at all. So just a good practice habit to get into. So after I have all the chips on here, the solder is pretty thick, and it will hold it enough so I can transfer it to the hot plate. And I'm going to use the hot plate along with the hot air rework station. And I could do it with just the hot air. I could even just do it with a soldering iron, but it's a lot quicker if I do both of them, because I'll get a nice even heat distribution on the board. If I try to use hot air or soldering iron to solder this chip here, it's easy to overheat the chip because that thermal pad is sinking a lot of heat to the bottom of the board. So to properly reflow that chip, you could sometimes damage the chip. So this way we get an even heat, we don't really overheat any components, and it's fast. So alright. So you'll see me pick up and drop the components, and usually that's for like a diode where you need it in a certain direction and you don't want to mount it upside down. You can just keep kind of dropping it until it flips over. So like there, it's upside down, and so you just drop it, and pretty good chance of it landing upside, right side up again. Okay, so I'm going to set this to 150 degrees Celsius, the plate. And normally I would probably set it a little higher than that, like 200 degrees. But the solder melts at about 183 degrees Celsius. So I'm going to set it a little less than that, just so I can get some footage. So I can kind of use this microscope to zoom in on an area, hit it with the hot air, and then change the camera angle. So, and this, you've seen this in other videos. Big fan of these types of adjustable arms that machinists use. This one is actually one for cameras, so I use this to mount my phone here, and I'll use them for oscilloscope probes and other things like that. And I like using it for the USB microscope because the base that it comes with is okay for inspecting little parts, but if I need to get like a weird angle, this is pretty good. So okay, so now the board has had some time to cool down, and we can just give it like a quick inspection here, make sure we're not missing anything. And it's actually kind of nice that this chip bridged the pins, so you can kind of see what to do if that happens to you. And you'll get a lot more of those bridges if you don't use a stencil. It's almost guaranteed. If you try to use just apply the paste by hand, this is 0.65 millimeter pitch here, and that's fine. It's just when that does happen, you pretty much have to use solder wick. So like I said, not a problem, just something to look out for. And you can get lucky and use like a soldering iron and just kind of drag the tip, and a lot of the time you'll break the bridges apart like that, especially with larger pitch chips. But the smaller you get, the harder that is, and you kind of have to use solder wick. But yeah, so the board looks good, and next video I'll do the through-hole components. So hope you like that video, and I'll see you guys next time.